My name is Elias Cade. I'm 34 years old and a lead systems architect with DARPA's Advanced Defense Initiative. Tomorrow, I'll be walking into a boardroom at Stonebridge Aerodyne, a high-profile defense contractor and the company my father and brother both work for. What they don't know, I'm the one reviewing their flagship project and deciding if they get the $480 million contract they've been chasing for the last 2 years. 5 years ago, I walked away from this family. Walked away from being the forgotten son, the artsy tech kid who tinkered with circuits instead of chasing an MBA. My father called my work nonsense coding and said real men wore suits and ran companies. My brother Chase fit that role perfectly, athlete turned business golden boy with the swagger of a TED Talk. Tonight, I'm back at our childhood home in Falls Creek, Virginia, for family dinner. My mother's roast beef is probably in the oven, and someone will ask me if I've finally settled down. I'll nod, sip water, smile politely, let them have their assumptions. I won't correct anyone. Because tomorrow, when I walk into that boardroom in a suit tagged Federal Liaison and break down the flaws in Chase's so-called innovation, their silence will say everything. Let them savor tonight. Tomorrow, everything shifts. The gravel crunched under my rental car as I pulled into the old driveway. The house looked the same colonial red brick, flag hanging half limp, and my father's silver Cadillac parked perfectly aligned with the faded hedges. The porch light flickered like always, like it never got fixed because real problems demanded real attention. I took a breath and checked my watch. 6:58 p.m. Right on time. Not too eager. Not too late. When I stepped inside, my mother called from the kitchen without even turning. Eli, doors open. Take your shoes off. Chase is already here. Of course he was. The kitchen still smelled like rosemary and butter. The old ceramic rooster stood on the counter, guarding my mother's sacred spice drawer like it had for 2 decades. At the dining room table sat Chase, in a blue sport coat, and that effortless grin people either loved or envied. His wife Serena sat beside him, picture perfect in her wine-red blouse, sipping from a glass already half-finished. Look who made it, Chase smirked. Our nomadic genius. I offered a half-smile. Good to see you too. My father didn't stand. He just gave me a nod and asked, still doing that? Algorithm stuff? I nodded. Something like that. We ate in a haze of small talk and curated stories. Chase held court, of course talking about markets and defense synergy and modular automation platforms. My father leaned in, nodding like every word was gospel. I stayed quiet, watching, absorbing. At one point, Chase laughed and said, you know, Eli, if you ever get tired of the theory world, we could use someone with your brains at Stonebridge. I raised an eyebrow. You hiring interns? The silence cut through the room before Serena forced a laugh and lifted her wineglass again. The rest of dinner was a loop of polite dismissal. Not cruel, just absent, like I was a ghost, sitting beside them. I didn't bother explaining that I'd written the primary code framework being used in half of the Pentagon's next-gen surveillance platforms. I didn't tell them the government flew me across 3 continents this year alone. I just waited, because tomorrow, I wouldn't need to explain anything. That night, I stayed in my old room still, decorated in navy blue with posters of vintage tech and a dusty telescope pointed at nothing. The trophy shelf hadn't changed either. Robotics team, 2nd place. Science fair, finalist. All pre-college. Nothing after. No photo of my master's graduation. No mention of my DC security clearance. Just a time capsule of the boy they expected me to be, not the man I'd become. I sat at the edge of the bed and opened my briefcase. Inside was a sleek navy folder stamped with the DARPA seal and a briefing binder marked Confidential, Project Harpy, Federal Review Panel. The lead reviewer's name was mine. Tomorrow, I'd walk into Stonebridge's top floor as the man who could approve or destroy their dream contract. They didn't know. They would. My name is Major Ethan Calloway, 34 years old, United States Air Force Cyber Warfare Division. At 0700 tomorrow, I'll be standing at the front of a Pentagon war room, delivering a classified threat briefing on a Chinese quantum intrusion prototype. My audience will include senior defense contractors, Pentagon Brisand, my father, Gregory Calloway, Connecticut O of Meridian Defense Solutions. He doesn't know I'm the lead analyst, just like he didn't know I've spent the last decade coordinating covert cyber disruption strategies under black budget initiatives. He thinks I'm still in signals, probably fixing satellites or something. That's what he's always told his colleagues when they ask what I do. The last time we spoke beyond obligatory holiday calls, he told me, Ethan, I just don't understand why you didn't want to follow a real career path. He said it with that same forced patience he used when I told him I turned down MIT's graduate program to enter the Air Force directly. He never asked why. Tonight, I'm having dinner with my parents for the first time in 2 years. My mother texted that my older brother Evan would be there. Evan's now VP of Quantum Systems at Meridian, which means he's one step away from inheriting Dad's throne. Good for him. Evan never questioned the blueprint. Ivy League, MBA, golf. Every speech from my father about the future of the family legacy was just a coded map to Evan's coronation. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror of my Arlington apartment, straightening my civilian blazer, the one that made me look less military according to my mother. A plain button-up, no ribbons, no insignia. I was expected to blend in, to fit the image they could understand, not challenge it. I arrived at their estate outside Alexandria just before 6 p.m. The house hadn't changed. It never did. Big brick walls, massive glass doors, too much stone, and not enough soul. The kind of house built more for image than warmth. My mom opened the door with a smile that almost reached her eyes. "Ethan," she said, reaching to hug me. "You look so grown up." "I'm 34, Mom," I replied, stepping inside. The scent of roast chicken and rosemary floated in the air, mingled with the faint undertone of her perfume, something nostalgic and a little sharp. Evan was already in the living room holding a glass of Merlot and talking to Dad. He looked up and grinned, then walked over. "Look what the cat dragged in. How's the great mystery job going?" "Still doing a lot of keyboard tapping," I said evenly. "Must be nice to get paid to hide behind a monitor." I smiled. You'd be surprised what kind of things can happen behind a monitor. Dad joined us, already sipping his scotch. "Ethan," he nodded. "Glad you could make it. I assume they let you off duty for the night." "It's been scheduled for a while," I replied. "You just never replied to the RSVP." He ignored the jab. "We've got a big meeting tomorrow with the Pentagon. Your brother's presenting on our new secure node integration platform. National level stuff." "Yeah?" I said, taking a sip of water. "Sounds important." "It is," Evan jumped in. "We're partnering with DoD on some new initiatives, heavy quantum resistant stuff. We've even got a general coming in." "Classified project?" Dad frowned. "You don't need to worry about the details." I looked at him for a second, then nodded. "Sure." Dinner was the usual theater. My mom asked about the weather. Evan made jokes about Elon Musk's latest tweet. Dad told a story about shaking hands with a senator. No one asked what I'd been working on. No one asked if I was seeing anyone. I wasn't surprised. I stopped expecting curiosity from them years ago. As dessert was served something artisanal and overpriced, Evan leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, Ethan, Meridian's hiring civilian analysts. You wouldn't have to hide what you do anymore. You could actually be part of something real." I met his gaze. "I already am." "Come on," he said, laughing. "What's the point of doing important work if no one sees it?" I smiled slowly, placing my fork down. "You'll see it tomorrow." My dad's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I stood and grabbed my coat. "Thanks for dinner. I've got an early briefing. I'll see you both at Meridian's war room at 0900. Their silence followed me out the door. Back in my apartment, I took out my uniform. Midnight blue, polished, with silver oak leaves on my shoulders, 2 commendation bars, and a secure badge for eyes-only access. Tomorrow, I would brief the room. I would dissect every technical misstep in Meridian's prototype. I would lay out the Pentagon's concerns. And when the final slide appears showing lead analyst, Major Ethan Callaway, USAFI, wouldn't have to say a word. The silence would speak loud enough. At exactly 0855, I stepped into the Meridian Defense Solutions headquarters through the side entrance reserved for senior Department of Defense personnel. The receptionist glanced up, eyes catching the insignia on my uniform, and stiffened visibly. "Good morning, Major Callaway," she said, rising from her seat. "War room?" I asked casually. "Executive level. Conference room 7. They've been waiting on the Pentagon liaison." "Good," I said. "Let them wait 5 more minutes." The elevator hummed up to the executive level, my reflection steady in the polished chrome walls. Uniform pressed, ribbons aligned, expression unreadable. I had spent the better part of a decade becoming this version of myself, disciplined, methodical, and immune to provocation. Today was never about vengeance. It was about truth. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a reception area filled with men in navy suits, women in tailored skirts, and one face I recognized instantly. He was standing near the touchscreen conference display, deep in conversation with a group of engineers. His voice was confident, polished, full of the same effortless bravado he'd perfected since college. He didn't notice me immediately, but others did. Conversations hushed, eyes turned, and then Evan looked up. He froze mid-sentence, tablet still in his hand. His brows drew together in disbelief. Ethan? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked calmly past him and through the double-glass doors of conference room 7. Inside were 24 key project staff, senior Meridian executives, a few Pentagon liaisons I'd briefed before, and, sitting at the head of the table, Gregory Calloway, me father. He looked up and smiled politely, not recognizing me at first. And then, as I stepped fully into the light, and the full rank of Major Ethan Calloway gleamed across my chest, the color drained from his face. Major Calloway, said Colonel Anders from DoD Procurement. Thanks for joining us in person. Everyone, this is our technical operations lead from the Cyber Warfare Division. He'll be conducting today's vulnerability assessment for Sentinel Edge. Gasps, whispers, a ripple of quiet confusion. I didn't flinch. My voice was steady. Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. As I booted my secure tablet, my father finally found his voice. What is this? Ethan, you're the liaison? No, I said, locking eyes with him. I'm the architect of the Pentagon's entire cyber defense evaluation initiative. Your project is just one of 14 I oversee. Evan entered a moment later, pale. This is a joke, right? I didn't reply. Instead, I tapped the screen and shared the first slide. Classified internal memo, Meridian Quantum Protocol. Preliminary risk assessment findings. Red text below read. Status, non-compliant. Gasps filled the room. Your current system is vulnerable to lateral packet infiltration, I said, pacing calmly. 3 days ago, I conducted a white hat intrusion sim. Time to breach, 7 minutes. Impossible, one of the engineers blurted out. I tapped again. Slide 2. Video feed, simulated breach. It showed my team accessing Meridian's internal framework, manipulating test data in real time. No firewalls triggered, no alerts. Seamless entry. The room fell deathly quiet. My father's hands tightened into fists on the table. You went behind our backs. You handed us the blueprints during your last pitch, I said. It's standard protocol. You just didn't know I was the one reading them. I moved to slide 3. Furthermore, your encryption model based on an outdated lattice framework is compromised. Had this been a real intrusion, our warfighter data could have been leaked to hostile networks. We estimate a window of 90 seconds before irreversible exposure. Lorraine Quinn, Meridian COO, leaned forward. What's your recommendation, Major? Redesign. From the ground up, with new protocols, and full Pentagon oversight. I let the silence hang for a beat. Your funding for Phase 2 is suspended effective immediately, and any further collaboration requires direct engagement with my team. My father stood up suddenly. This is an ambush. No, I said, holding his gaze. This is accountability. He looked around the room, waiting for support. None came. Lorraine cleared her throat. Let's break for 15. The room emptied slowly. Some shook my hand. Others just nodded respectfully. Evan lingered by the door. You didn't have to humiliate us, he said quietly. I turned. I didn't. I gave you the truth. What you do with it is on you. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, and walked out. Only my father and I remained. He sat down slowly, as if the weight of his expectations had finally broken something inside him. I didn't know, he said quietly. I didn't realize who you'd become. I gave you every chance to see me, I replied. You chose not to look. He nodded once slowly. So what now? I looked around the room, the screen, the briefing notes, the silence that followed. Now, I said, we fix what's broken, starting with this program, and maybe, eventually, with us. He didn't reply. But for the first time in years, he didn't look away. Later that afternoon, I stood alone on the rooftop helipad of Meridian's headquarters, letting the wind tug at my uniform. Below, the city of Arlington pulsed with the quiet urgency of power contracts negotiated, secrets traded, loyalties sold. I hadn't come up here to think. I'd come to breathe. The meeting had ended with polite nods and stiff acknowledgments. Lorraine Quinn had thanked me again, promised immediate cooperation, and dispatched an internal team to begin revisions. The executive board, including my father, had remained quiet. No denials, no challenges, just the cold realization of oversight exposed. I was halfway through composing my after-action report when my secure line rang. I answered without hesitation. Major Calloway, I said. Ethan, it's Colonel Anders. Just reviewed the field footage. Impressive work today. Thank you, sir. I'll keep this short. We want you in the room for the final budget allocation meeting with the Senate Appropriations Committee next month. You'll brief them directly on Sentinel Edge and the vulnerabilities we found. My pulse ticked up. That wasn't a typical assignment for someone at my rank. You're aware that's above my current clearance for congressional sessions. You won't be for long, Anders said. Your name is on the fast track for Lieutenant Colonel. Just keep doing what you're doing. I'll be ready, I replied. We hung up, and for a moment the satisfaction felt unfamiliar, almost too clean. But I knew better. The real mess wasn't in firewalls or code vulnerabilities. It was in the spaces we called family. That evening, I returned to my apartment in Pentagon Row, dropped my go bag by the door, and stared at the still unopened bottle of Macallan 18 that had sat on my shelf for 2 years. It had been a graduation gift from someone who had once believed in me. I uncorked it. Across the room, a digital photo frame scrolled through old mission images. My team in Mosul, a quiet ops base in Ramstein, a briefing room in Brussels. Not a single family photo. Not one. I poured 2 fingers of whiskey and sat. Then the knock came. I opened the door to find my father standing there, dressed not in his usual tailored suit but in a plain windbreaker and jeans. He held no briefcase, just a folder under his arm. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. I stepped aside. He didn't sit, just stood there looking around the apartment, taking in the military precision of it, books aligned, shoes by the door, polished brass on the wall display. "You always were neat," he muttered. I waited. He cleared his throat and opened the folder. Inside were photos, dozens of them. My ROTC commissioning, my first deployment, my cyber commendation. All printed. All clipped from newsletters, press releases, or articles. "I collected these," he said. "I didn't know how to tell you I followed your career." "Then why say nothing?" "Because I was ashamed," he said simply. "Not of you, of myself, of how wrong I was, how badly I misjudged what mattered." I stared at him, unsure what hurt more. His silence all those years, the quiet confession now. "I used to think success was the boardroom," he went on. "Revenue, shareholders, prestige. But what you've done, what you've built, that's real. That's legacy. You don't get to rewrite the past," I said. "I stood on stages you never saw, took oaths you never asked about." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here. Not for forgiveness, for acknowledgement. You earned your place, and I see it now." We stood in silence. Then he placed the folder gently on my coffee table and turned to leave. "Dad," I called as his hand touched the doorknob. He turned back. "You want to come to the next briefing? I can clear you for civilian observer status." His face flickered, emotions too complex for words. "I'd like that," he said. And then he was gone. At 0600 the next morning, I stood in the Cyber Operations Center beneath the Pentagon. Screens flickered with threat maps, satellite feeds, AI intercepts. The world spun on chaos. But here, there was order, mission, structure. Staff Sergeant approached me. "Ma'am," he said. "Intel from Norcom just came in. Possible breach test on one of the Sentinel prototypes. West Coast lab." My jaw tightened. "Notify my team. Schedule an emergency session." "Yes, ma'am." As I turned back to the console, my fingers moved with precision. No fear, no hesitation. The mission wasn't over. This was just the next war. And this time, I wasn't invisible anymore. The Pentagon's Situation Room was always cool, always quiet, but never calm. I stood at the head of the operations table. A sea of top-level analysts and cyber defense leads clustered around me. The screens along the wall pulsed red, with threat indicators from Sentinel Edge's West Coast server and intrusion attempt, logged at 3:41 PST, sophisticated enough to bypass 2 layers of encryption before being caught. This wasn't a student prank. This was professional, state level, and close. "Colonel Dane," one of the analysts said, tapping the touch screen. "We traced the intrusion to a proxy chain originating in Vancouver, but the packets show latency injection codes similar to what we flagged 6 months ago from the Ure group." Ure, ghosts. A private cyber espionage collective long rumored to be state-backed Chinese, Russian. No one could confirm. They didn't steal for profit. They stole for positioning. "And what were they targeting?" I asked. Another analyst answered. "Encrypted architecture blueprints for Sentinel's Phase 3, integration, the civilian defense crossover design. Meaftenst." That crossover model wasn't just theoretical. It was the linchpin of future homeland defense drones, smart grids, AI-assisted crisis response, all on one unified platform. If they cracked that, lock down all access to the Phase 3 architecture, I ordered. Initiate firewall isolation protocols. I want sandbox mirrors installed in every linked node by 0800. Yes, ma'am. And elevate to code rook across all Sentinel-associated facilities, including Meridian. Heads lifted at that. You think it's an inside leak? Someone asked. I think I'm done assuming otherwise, I said. An hour later, I stood again in the towering glass lobby of Meridian Systems, my uniform drawing second glances as always. This time I wasn't there for a briefing, I was there for a confrontation. Logan met me near the elevators. His eyes were bloodshot. I heard what happened, he said. Did it come from here? Too early to say, I replied, watching him closely. But you're the one overseeing integration, and that makes you relevant. He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. This isn't personal, I added. This is national security. If there's even a possibility that your team had unauthorized data flow, I need to see every line of code, every private server, every sub, contractor's audit. His posture stiffened, but he nodded. You'll have full access. Good, I said. Because if I find even one byte of data pointing back to this floor, I'll shut this entire building down. We rode the elevator to the secure development wing in silence. As we entered, all conversations hushed. Engineers at terminals froze mid-keystroke. I approached the head dev, a wiry man named Niles who barely looked up. Colonel, he said, you'll want to see this. He rotated his monitor. It displayed a log of unauthorized access pings for in total, over the past 72 hours all, executed using an internal authentication key. One issued to a user named K. Davenport. He blinked. Catherine Davenport? Niles nodded. Project manager for the Aegis submodule. She hasn't shown up for 2 days. Sick leave, allegedly. Logan looked stunned. That's not possible. She's been on every call. Have you seen her in person? No, just video calls. But wait. He turned to Niles. Pull her last video meeting from internal comms, right now. Niles tapped keys. A window appeared, showing a still from the most recent video call. Davenport's face on screen but with a subtle delay between voice and movement. Her lips didn't quite sync. Deepfake, I muttered. They're already inside. The screen went black. By nightfall, a federal warrant had been issued. Catherine Davenport was missing. Her access badges deactivated, her accounts frozen. But the damage was still unclear. Back in my command terminal, I reviewed the full breach sequence. The encryption hadn't failed. It had been bypassed by trust, by giving the wrong person a key. There's a kind of silence that settles in military command when something like this happens. It's not panic, it's preparation. We know how to lose ground. What matters is how fast we take it back. I activated a secure call line. Colonel Dane, the voice on the other end said, General Armstrong. We have a code red situation, I told him. Sentinel Edge has been compromised internally. Civilian crossover elements potentially exposed. You have full discretionary authority, he said. Handle it. I exhaled, shut the line, and opened my personal console. One name had appeared on the outer edge of the U-Ray chatter net over the past month, an old adversary from the Defense Intelligence days. An independent operator known only as Wraith. He had access to the kind of AI-sculpted deception networks that could pull off deepfakes in real time. The kind of person who didn't breach systems. He rewrote their DNA. And if he was in this, Sentinel wasn't just under threat. It was already in the crosshairs. And I'd have to go off the book completely to stop what was coming next. The underground cyber ops bunker beneath the Pentagon was dimly lit and dead silent when I arrived. The only sound was the low hum of servers and the soft clicking of analysts parsing through thousands of lines of threat code. I walked past the decryption hub and straight into the classified section marked OCP, Outside Contingency Protocols. Brendan was waiting. No, not the cousin from the earlier stories. This Brendan was a quiet warhound of the Cyberwar division, known for dismantling rogue AI frameworks before their creators even realized they'd gone live. I'd pulled him in under directive, Whisper Edge, a protocol I had the rare authority to activate. Colonel, he greeted, eyes never leaving the tactical wall display. The Wraith construct just went dark. Last trace routed through a Lithuanian dark fiber relay, then poof. Not poof, I said, removing my gloves. Calculated silence. We both knew what that meant. Wraith was preparing to deploy. Not a probe, not surveillancian operation. What's he after? Brendan asked. The Keystone Framework, I replied. The integration core of Sentinel Edge's civilian crossover. He's not here to steal the data, he wants to replace it. Inject his own protocol deep into our architecture before we even launch Phase 3. You think he wants a kill switch? Brendan asked, raising an eyebrow. I think he wants full remote access, I said. To everything. Power grids, civil defense drones, emergency response systems. If someone like Wraith embedded a self-replicating directive into the Keystone codebase, America's entire domestic response infrastructure would belong to him. And whoever paid him, where would he plant it? Brendan asked. Through a ghost server. There's only one node left unaccounted for, I said, pulling up the secure map. The Anchorage Mirror. Cold storage archive, Brendan said, his voice tightening. No network connection. Physical access only. And guess whose security badge just pinged there 2 hours ago? I asked. Brendan's face paled. Catherine. She's not just a defector, I said. She's Wraith's plant. Possibly more. I opened a secure SATCOM line. General Armstrong, this is Colonel Dane. I need rapid transport authorization. I'm going to Alaska. The next 10 hours were a blur racing against time across icy skies, flying in a DoD-modified Gulfstream with full tactical authority. When I landed at the Anchorage facility, it was already snowing sideways. The building was a gray block buried in white and silence. I entered with a 2-person ops team. Inside, silence. Cold, humming silence. Then I saw her. Catherine stood alone at the end of the archive bay. A single laptop plugged into the central Nexus tower, its fan whining as if under strain. She didn't flinch when I called out. Colonel Dane, she said softly. Took you longer than I expected. You betrayed your country, I said, leveling my voice. She turned. I followed the truth. The system you defend is flawed. Wraith offered correction. By installing chaos? By installing freedom, she snapped. Freedom from algorithms run by senators who can't spell cybersecurity. From generals who think drone strikes solve everything. This code will reset the balance. I raised my sidearm. Step away from the console. She smiled and hit enter. The Nexus tower screamed. Brendan's voice came through my earpiece. Signal spike! She's initiating a neural code fork. It's rewriting Sentinel's core in real time. No. I surged forward, grabbed her shoulder and pulled her back. The screen flickered. Then, access denied. Injection halted. Key override detected. Brendan shouted. You locked it down. I stared at the screen. At the bottom corner, a string of code blinked. Override protocol. Dane. E.01. I had forgotten I'd built that kill code years ago, buried so deep even I barely remembered. But somewhere in my subconscious, I'd known this day might come. Catherine collapsed to her knees, defeated. You were never the failure, she said. I just chose the wrong war. He didn't reply. Instead, I reached over and shut the system down. Back in D.C. 2 weeks later, I stood in the same Pentagon operations room where it all started. Project Sentinel was intact. The breach had been sealed. The code purified. Colonel Dane, General Armstrong said, shaking my hand. What you did in Anchorage, this nation owes you. I was just doing my job, I replied. But it wasn't just a job. It was my path. Mine alone, forged without needing applause. That night, back in my apartment, I poured a small glass of bourbon and watched the city lights reflect in the window. Somewhere out there, WR8 still moved in the shadows. But the code was clean. The line held, and I was ready for whatever came next. Because I wasn't just someone's daughter or someone's sister. I was the firewall. I was the reason they still slept peacefully at night.